You've probably heard the term garbage in, garbage out. If you're watching this video, I bet you have. And that's true. This is about making sure that your organization doesn't build a sophisticated analytics apparatus or measurement platform on top of something that might be faulty or have some flaws in it, because that can undermine the whole point of it. So we're going to go back and revisit the three levels of depth that we discussed in the original framework, sort of the data sources, the sophistication of those and how they're used, and then ultimately taking all that good work and baking it into the culture of an organization. So data sources, we like to kind of call out the 4 V's here: the volume, veracity, the velocity, and the variety of data. We'll talk about that in a little more detail later on. So how do you do that? It's really just an audit, right? You meet with the owner of the data, you understand how it's populated, what it's used for, what the different fields mean, and you compare each of those fields against the 4 V's so you can kind of profile each element that you have to work with. The next level down is to just take that audit and start to categorize and prioritize the data so that your effort is exerted your downstream effort is exerted in such a way that it helps the business the most and the fastest. So what you want to do is think about how much effort is going to be needed to collect this data or to transform it in a way that we need it. How much is it going to cost? How important is it for the business? How viable is the data to be continue to be populated in the future? So and that kind of ties right in with the third level down on this graphic is we got to work with the leaders of these different departments to understand what it is they're trying to do. And so you're going to get different opinions about the usefulness of different data points. Someone's going to have a much more operational view on how the businesses should be improved, while someone might have a more marketing, top line view or a demand generation view. So what you're seeing here is just a schematic of the basic flow of data. On the leftmost side, it's all about data capture, data QA. In some cases, data needs to be repaired or imputed. And then it has to be connected together where it can, whether that's by a date or by a customer ID or store number. So that's the raw material. That's stored typically in some database, or in most cases a far more complex data infrastructure than what I'm showing in this schematic, but you get the idea. It has to be somewhere in its raw form, in its repaired form, or its QA'd form. And after that, your analytics group would take that clean data, hopefully it's clean to a degree, and they would work to transform it in ways that produce more usefulness to the business. That could be, just for example, looking at maybe unit sales over time. From there, the data can be explored, modeled, looking for insight, right? What we're trying to do is take this cleaned and in some cases transformed data, and we're trying to extract useful information from it. And then once we feel we got a good handle on how the data is going to help us improve the business, you want to automate that to the extent possible. And that's what I'm showing on the rightmost section here. It's what you want to ultimately do is, a model is great. It can give you insight, but unless you do something with it, it's pretty trivial. So you want to influence the stakeholders and then create strategies from that, and then even innovate. So an organization should be trying to come up with new ideas to improve. And data is, I think, a fundamental way to do that. There needs to be a feedback loop, I think, from all these changes that are being made to the business back to the raw data, so analysts can go back and look at whether these changes are, in fact, making the improvements that were expected. So kind of to sum that up, why are we doing all this? It's to improve our organization. And again, I mentioned a lot of for-profit use cases of that. It could be, a nonprofit trying to increase donations. It could be a higher education trying to improve the acceptance rate of certain potential candidates. So I briefly mentioned it earlier, and that is the 4 V's of data: the variety, volume, velocity, and veracity. It's sort of a succinct way to sum up all the different problems data can cause you, and just think about it as a scale for each of these. So starting with variety, there's from low to high. You could have a couple data sources, maybe a CSV from, your stores that says how many unit sales they sold yesterday, which is useful information, and that could be acted upon to a degree. But in many cases, businesses will have much more than that, and that data could be not only just sales or how much we spent on Facebook in the past year, but it could be things like number of employees, or it could be the exact location at a given moment of a delivery vehicle. And that all needs to be combined together to paint a picture that can be acted upon. The volume of data, this is probably becoming the least of the worries of these four, but it's still a concern. And that is, how much data you have to deal with just to get the data processed in a reasonable amount of time. The velocity of the data also is important, especially as we think about what decisions a business needs to make and how quickly they need to act. So if you're saying you're gonna collect marketing data at the monthly level and maybe quarterly and go back and try to make a decision from that, I got news for you. It's probably not going to be too insightful, because in most cases what you're trying to influence might have happened within that monthly time frame. With respect to data sophistication, I think one of the most important skills someone can have, especially in data science, is knowing what you don't know. I think the data comes from many sources, as I've talked about. Data needs to be handled because of the veracity of it in so many different ways. And then the infrastructure you need to actually accomplish all that and get information to stakeholders and people that need it, that has several considerations that I think not a lot of people really think about much. And starting with the sources, so often a lot of business analysts think about maybe sales and operations data and maybe marketing, and start to crunch that data and see how marketing might be affecting the business. There's a lot more that maybe should be taken into consideration. So that data comes often from sensors, and then how is that data collected and then troubleshot in cases where there's issues with it, and then integrated with the larger data infrastructure. Data handling, we've all probably heard the term structured, unstructured data. There's even semi-structured data, but often there's missing data. And what do you have to do with missing data? Is it important that it's missing, or does it need to be imputed so it can be incorporated into some operation you've built into your data infrastructure? So we don't want to ignore how company culture needs to adapt and account for the data their organization produces or collects. Starting at the top, the CEO, I think the CEO has a responsibility to set the tone. The C-suite, they are going and they're taking that message from the CEO and evangelizing that across their departments. And it might take different forms across departments, but the idea is the same. Your chief analytics officer, your chief data officer, they are constantly striving to give the analysts better tools, improve their efficiency, their speed to insight, and then also, approving and consulting on data policies, which is very important. Which data should be, closely guarded, which should be easily accessible across the organization, and taking that all into account. The rest of the C-suite, their job is to promote a data-driven culture, so carry on that vision of the CEO that their group's decisions need to be justified by reliable data and analysis. I think they also are in a position to suggest data policies. For example, a chief legal officer might have a lot of considerations to put forth in front of a chief data officer who may not know all of the potential pitfalls of data and how it could negatively affect the business. The best practice that I've seen with organizations who are data-driven is creating a shared services group for data science or analytics. These highly talented individuals will sort of work together and serve marketing, they'll serve finance, they'll serve operations, and all these different departments, and they become comfortable with the data that comes from several different sources and how it affects different areas of the business, so that when they're faced with a project the next time around, think about all the considerations that maybe the person bringing them the project had not thought of. All along, we want that group to be improving their speed to market, their speed to insight, I should say, and quality and just general utilization of what they do across the organization. And then department staff, exactly that. They are executing on the vision set forth by the CEO and the C-suite by making decisions based on data, knowing when it's time to seek out new data or to question data maybe that doesn't make sense to them, and go back and work with the analytics team to correct or improve any issue that they think is going to help them do their job better. So with that, we will wrap the second episode of this series. This was the first deep dive into the 5 pillars set forth in the first overview series about data, its importance, how it's a foundation to a lot of greater things that companies are striving for. Next, we're going to be deep diving into reporting, which is probably an underappreciated area of business analytics, and kind of knowing what's happening is paramount to strong business performance. And I think that the next episode is going to be enlightening there.